So about half of us, because I've only joined them the link. So you're virtual when you do them? I am, but there are about 4 people that are, well, okay. Can you switch in and out? Like you can go and they can stay back? I can, but if you go, you know, you're supposed to, like I thought we were very certified. Yeah. But the people that want to virtual and the same people. Okay. So I think it's too soon, and there's too many people. Hmm. It's a bigger forum. Yeah, of course. And there's also more administrators to do. Okay. But some are always on the screen as well. Maybe 2 administrators on the screen.
Oh, 98, 97.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I understand the other issue, but it's one of those that it's a accommodation issue that you personally have to make that accommodation for. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Because so many prolific writers are actually dyslexic.
Yeah. Okay. Did you have other kids in the district, you know?
I could have been one more in a similar name, but I didn't look
Okay.
closer. So, Deanna, I'm gonna turn the mic on and put the agenda up. Todd, can you let me know if you can see the agenda right now?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, thank you. Kelly, anytime you're ready. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Wow, we all got microphones.
You ready? Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And first up is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You missed it. I almost fell over. Oh, my God. Sorry. Okay. Everybody's got their own mic now. All right. Personal. Okay, so 4 announcements tonight. It looks like Christina, Todd, and Gary are virtual for personal reasons, and Gusta will not make the meeting tonight for personal reasons. So, I'd like to get a motion to adopt the agenda. Naomi first, Bob is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, this is a study session. Study session meetings are designed for the purpose of having administrative.
This is busy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Because it says study session meetings on my thing, and that is my fault because I have the old one in front of me. Okay, so let's start again. So at this point, we're going to do Board of Education comments and reports. So we're going to start with Naomi on this side.
You don't want to start with Grace?
I'll go back to Grace.
Okay. All right, great. All right, I'm really happy that we can safely offer a return to several of our fall sports. I know that our girls are right now over there on our fields playing, and I was also told it's Senior Girls Night, so that's very exciting. This past weekend, I was able to witness our first cross-country meet in this new norm. On Saturday, it was hosted by Shannon, our women, and both our men and women athletes ran. From my perspective, and that is as a parent spectator, the meet went very well despite the last-minute changing of restrictions. And those changes actually were positive because more students were able to run than originally planned. So that was pretty exciting too. And my son was actually one of those. Other than not recognizing many people because of their masks, it felt a little bit more like old times because a lot of times with these meets, it's the parents that come rather than a surreal experience. And so that was very exciting. The coaches did an excellent job managing the groups and keeping the event on time. And I'm looking forward to this Saturday because it's also a virtual meet for Queensbury. That means we're going to be back here, and the kids will get to run here at Shen again. So that just felt really wonderful to see, and it was really well done. And I think we're going to have pictures that we're going to look back many years later with these kids running with masks on, and it'll be an interesting time. So during this time, I also wanted to give you an update on committees and partnership groups that I'm part of. There's been a lot of catching up. I'm sure the rest of the board has been very busy too. These meetings are all held virtually, and the really nice thing about these virtual meetings is that you get to see faces and you get to see people smiling back at you, and mostly smiling back at you, but it really is nice. And also attendance is much better, especially for these PTA units. There's been 4 PTA meetings that I've attended since our last business meeting. Shenendehowa and Arenda were 2 weeks back, and Guana was, and the high school PTSA was last week. Council was also last Wednesday, and there have been 2 partnership meetings, one with Guana, and tomorrow is the high school one, and it's the first time I've served on the high school partnership team, so I'm really looking forward to that. So for the committees, there's been a lot of work happening. Audit committee was last Monday. We're going to hear tonight from Cusack and Company as they present the results from the independent audit report, so I don't really need to say much more on that. There's other agenda items that are also related to that meeting. Yesterday was our kickoff meeting for IPAC, and we pretty much got a catch up where we left off last year and what we're going to be doing going forward. And Dr. Wood is going to be providing an update later tonight specific to some consolidated grants that she had also shared during that meeting. Next week will be our kickoff environmental committee meeting, and so I don't have anything to report on that. Hopefully I will for the next meeting. And then policy. So there was a policy. There's actually now going to be 2 leading up to this one. There was one right after the last business meeting, and there's one tomorrow where we will discuss policies related to the 7200 series, and that's really specific to student progress. And I also am hoping to have an opportunity tomorrow to revisit the code of conduct as well. And then the last meeting the committee that I wanted to give an update on, and I think this one we have a lot going on, is now it's called the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity Committee, which was formerly referred to as the Cultural Diversity Committee. And I believe the name better captures actually their charter, their goals, and specifically to equity. Our last meeting was September 16th, and our next one will be November 18th. And at that time, we're going to be hearing, hopefully, from our subcommittees. Lisa Kissinger, she's taken the lead on surveying the group and, identifying people to work in these 3 subcommittees. They are curriculum and instruction. That's the first subcommittee. The second one's personnel and professionalism, and the third one is organizational culture. And they're going to report back to the larger group. The other thing I wanted to mention, I also wanted to mention this for you, Bob, because I know in your spreadsheet you have, when we were talking about those demands, things that are being done, and this is specific to training. So there's a 3-part training that Dr. Wood invited committee members to attend, and I will be attending this. It's a 3-part training. It's called Bridging the Racial Equity Divide, and it's being sponsored by Capridge and BOCES. There's one later this month, one in November, and one in December. And tomorrow, our very own Dr. Robinson is going to be a panelist for a webinar called Equity and Inclusivity, Answering the Call to Action. It's from noon to 1:30, and if you haven't registered, there is still time to do that. So with this one, this is also a 3-part series where attendees will explore the background of equity and inclusion, and I believe there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. Is that correct?
Not the first 2.
Not the first 2. Okay. So they'll explore the background of equity and inclusion in education and get an update on current events involving these important issues. Attendees will also hear how the pandemic has broadened the need for equity in our schools and what districts can do to meet this need. And then I mentioned to you, Bob, about I believe these satisfy that you had a training area, although this is really broader because this is the stakeholders. That committee does have students on that serve, and teachers and parents and board members. So it's more of a all stakeholders instead of, because I think in your spreadsheet it says students and teachers maybe.
Okay.
Okay. And that's it. Thank you. Naomi?
Todd, do you have any comments for tonight?
Not at this moment, no, I do not.
Okay. Gary, do you have any comments for tonight?
Excuse me. Yes, I did. It relates to some comments that Bob Presley made during the good of the order in our last meeting. Mr. Presley spoke about the financial picture for the school year and to a lesser degree for next school year. Basically, Bob said that the school districts, including Shenendehowa, still don't have a clear picture of their finances because the state has not definitively told the districts what they will be receiving in state aid for the balance of the school year. The state, however, has informed the school districts that they can expect an across-the-board reduction in all aid of 20%. The state still is hoping that the federal government will provide funds to the state, which will in turn allow the states to provide more money for the local governments and the school districts. Bob also said that he anticipated that we may have a better picture of our finances in December. I agree with Mr. Presley's assessment, except that I believe that in December we will still lack definitive information from the state unless the state simply adopts a worst-case scenario and tells school districts that they must plan for the full 20% reduction. I would be surprised if this happened, since politicians don't like to deliver bad news and put this sort of thing off as long as possible. However, there are real reasons for a more pessimistic assessment, which what I see, and this is the result of what I see at the federal level. I do not see the Senate majority and the executive branch changing course and suddenly deciding to provide funds to the state and local governments, while both the White House and the Senate majority is held by Republicans. Just today, the president broke off negotiations with the House Democratic majority on the stimulus bill that would have, or potentially would have, provided financial relief to the states under their proposal. There is some possibility for a change in prospects for an agreement depending on the outcome of the election in four weeks. However, even if control changed due to the election, a newly elected president and a new majority in the Senate would not be installed until January 20th. Thus, no federal legislative relief would be likely to occur until after that date. If the Democrats do not gain both of the executive branch and the majority in the Senate, a stalemate would exist. The president could veto, or the Senate majority could simply refuse to introduce the legislation. There's another reason for lack of optimism regarding relief coming from Washington, either soon or in the long view. The simple reason is that our economy has only recovered partially, and only those in occupations requiring more education are actually recovering at this point. There is also a structural condition that there are also structural conditions that are not likely that are likely to inhibit economic recovery and allow only for slow growth. If these economic conditions are real, and I believe they are, funding for the federal government rescue of the economically stressed states and local governments would be very difficult. Now, I'm not one to say that the sky is falling, and I'm not a prophet of doom and gloom, but I do not look at the world through rose-colored glasses either. This approach leaves us vulnerable and ill-prepared. So what's the point of my making this statement? We do not want to be left poorly positioned and unprepared to deal with less desirable scenarios. Dealing with potentially bad news is not something we look forward to or that we seek. And we tend to gravitate towards pleasant news because it's a more comfortable place to be. Let's continue to be prepared regardless of the nature of the news, just as we have been during the administration of Dr. Robinson. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Okay, Bob, do you have any comments?
Sure, I got two things I'd like to speak about. One is just sort of an assessment of teaching during a pandemic. We're now past the major start points of starting the school year. And I've come to the conclusion that similar to what we do other things outside of education, we perform an important role for society. We're the ones providing mental health for students, and probably their parents are seeing that and seeing the importance of mental health. We're providing meals to people in need. We provide daycare for parents who expect their kid to be here all year, all day. And these are things outside of what we sign up to as educators or people focused on education. And so I think we have to apply the context of COVID is that we're a containment point. We're a big wall, because you've seen it the last probably 10 plus announcements. They haven't come from our school causing an outbreak. They've come from things coming into the school. And I think that's something we have to accept, much as we begrudgingly accept meal support and breakfast support, but you find out that you have to do that if you want to have a well-run school day. So I'm just sort of putting that out as context as the finding from my perspective of the last couple of weeks. Second thing I'd like to speak to is some questions on some people call it the sheet, some people call it structure. This is the document I put forward. I call it a breakdown and review of issues on racism, brought forward by the students that were very communicative back in August. That I think should be called a lens or a checklist, and compared and alongside used with the response back, which I think is also an excellent lens in terms of where we've covered a lot of things in the past. It provides a lot of needed perspective of where to go and what to do. Regarding what the agenda is on the meeting, I look at this and I see that we're covering and addressing things appropriately when we can. I read through the policy comments in detailed manner over the weekend, and clearly we're making changes in policy primarily because of direction on COVID and ESSA, which is a federally directed effort. So those things are moving forward in current policy. I look forward to other outcomes for their agenda for our policy committee. But I think this is something that is simply a good way to look at through a lens and also apply sort of a checklist. Are we there where I think we can say we accomplished a lot? Yeah, I think we always were there. But are we there where we can do more? I think there's a lot more that can be done. So I think that provides a good basis for me to look at the challenges they're in. And I look forward to seeing the work coming through the next couple meetings to get there. Thank you.
Christina, do you have any thoughts for tonight?
Yes, I mean, a lot of them is what's already been said, but one thing I have that's different that I'd like to share is I had the opportunity to participate in an interview with Carmen Diaz, who's a Sage College graduate student doing a research project on education and board of education governance. I found it really interesting with Dr. Robinson. She interviewed you as well, and Deanna, she will be interviewing you. Just found it very interesting because it helped reflect on really what our role is as a board, what our goals are, how do we collaborate with the district, what's the best way to be a governance body while adding, value to what we're providing to our students. One of the things that came out of this was she shared with me she's interviewed a lot of different school district boards, and she and her husband actually recently moved into the Shenendehowa school district area. They don't have kids yet, but because she heard it's a great community or raise a family, but then after talking to Dr. Robinson and other board members, she said she was reassured and inspired that they are in the best spot for them to be a part of a great community, and look forward to when they have kids that can be in the school district. But one of the things she also said, she couldn't believe how invested as a volunteer board, how invested we were. It's not just the 2 meetings a month, but knowing, and some of you touched upon in your comments, serving on a variety of committees throughout the district, within the different school buildings, so that we really are part of the fabric of the district, in all different capacities. And she thought that was really inspiring to hear that it's, that it is, we're more deep in what's going on. Although we are cautious, knowing that we have credible, superintendent, competent staff to do the day-to-day operations, knowing that we have an interest in really having our fingers on the pulse was something she found unique to school districts. And she also felt that the word collaboration was so key. Her goal is actually to become a superintendent someday, so she did say, hearing that word collaboration, she loved our goals as a board, not just the school district goals, but seeing how our board goals really fed into the district goals and supported those, but especially our genuine interest in really working together with students, alumni, the community in general, and equity and inclusivity, as well as mental health and continuing with the social, emotional well-being of our students. So just wanted to share that was a great experience. I think I look forward to her report when she comes out with it, just to see some other things and learn from that as well. So that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Christina. Grace, do you have any thoughts for tonight?
Yeah, I just have one thing for right now, which is more of just like an update thing. But as of right now, we are looking for and looking into different ways to get the best recruitment for the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity Committee that isn't just, that actually samples the whole student population. So we're reaching out to clubs right now, both in the high school and the middle school.
Okay, and there's just a couple things that I just wanted to go over for myself. Regarding the meetings that we have been to, the one PTA meeting that I did attend was Oranjan, and it was interesting. I'm echoing Naomi, I can't believe how busy the PTAs are in this environment. I mean, they're doing virtual fundraisers. There's an Elms Farm drive-through. They're just kicked it off, and I'm really astonished. It's good for them. And one thing that both Andy Hills and I both touched on that night was when we were talking about the reopening of schools. We were talking about what it looked like outside of Shenendehowa and the resources for our students. And, we talked about the cases, that what was coming up, and, reviewing what our procedure was. And we both talked about this cohort model that we have put in place here at Shenendehowa. And you just see people nodding their heads. I mean, it works, and it has worked for the multi-cases that we did have. And it just defines more of all the work that's been going on behind the scenes. So it was interesting to have that conversation, because both Andy and I were talking back and forth on that. The other piece that I wanted to talk about, just for myself, I wanted to talk to my board colleagues about. I've committed myself. I kind of came around to this, and I just fell into it. Twice a week, I'm listening to a presentation or a podcast about inclusivity, equity, diversity. I'm dedicating myself to that because I do find that there is a void within myself that I need to be a better listener. So today it was interesting. I listened to a Dr. Jacqueline Sanderlin. Have you ever heard of her? Very interesting, a little older, but has been around a while, and just very interesting to listen to her and what she defines. One thing that when we talk about curriculum, what we cover in curriculum, and she was talking about what we need to uncover in curriculum to become more of a well-rounded district. She talked about anti-racist and the fear zone, a learning zone, and a growth zone. I mean, I'm listening to this, and I'm like, that is so interesting. I never thought about that. It was a real conversation, and we got to listen to 8-year-olds to about 8-year-old to 12-year-olds, about 6 of them, giving their thought on what they're seeing in their atmosphere and what it means to them, what racism means to them, because we are not born racist. We are not born, do we know the color of people's skin or their religion, right? So this is, it was just it was well done. It was, again, it was shorter, but really drilled the point home. So if anybody gets to listen to that, Dr. Jacqueline Sanderlin, so by Scholastic, by the way, did a great job with that. So I want to do closing comments later and bring Dr. Robinson to the forefront. But at this point, those are my comments. So at this, this is a open, this is a public meeting. This is the opportunity that we're talking about that. Okay, this is an opportunity for the public to address the Board of Education because this meeting is being held with limited in-person attendance. If you are a district resident, please send questions, comments via boe@shenschools.org. All questions, comments come into the Office of Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and the superintendent. The board will not address specific questions, comments, but ask for your name and address in the event follow-up is necessary. Policy questions, concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions, concerns are typically addressed by the superintendent and/or designee. Does anybody else have any?
Yeah, you should, the student rep is here.
Oh, we have the student reps, okay. We have the student reps, we can get a comment from, an update from you. We can have a-
What are you saying?
Hi. So not much to update, just the diversity and inclusion meetings. We're trying to, like Grace said, we're trying to reach out to different clubs and really represent the school-wide on this committee.
Thank you. He's the only one representing.
Yes, correct.
And then I know we had a member of the public send an email in, and I just want to read it to have it on record, from Mr. Francois Paget. Dear members of the board, under a 504 plan, a student with spelling difficulties will not lose points for spelling errors even in ELA. No teacher will grade his spelling. His parents won't receive quarterly scorecards including spelling. No one knows whether the student's spelling is improving or not. The plan removes all accountability of the student and school for his spelling progress should the district expect more. I know we have heard from this community member before. The community member references a 529. I think we're talking about a 504 plan here, which is designed, of course, to ensure a student receives accommodations and will ensure their academic success and access to the learning environment. The matter has been brought, like I have said, to the attention of the Special Education Department, specifically Mrs. Mylod, and will further be brought to the attention of the High School Guidance Department to review the student's performance. So, I don't think we have any other comments. No. So at this point, Dr. Robinson, do you want to offer some tonight?
Just to mimic a couple comments that Mrs. Hoffman made before, the NYSBA webinar on tomorrow, Wednesday, starting at noon, I think would be a great opportunity for this board. It's interesting from my lens, because I would say probably for the past 10 years, we've been having this conversation, and it's great to see that NYSBA as an organization is fully committed on board to move the equity conversation beyond conversation to policy. Yesterday, I was on a NISCUS, New York State Council of School Superintendent Summit webinar with Jay Morona. Jay is the Deputy Executive Director of NYSBA. And we spoke to superintendents across the state about the draft equity policy that NYSBA is in the process of developing. In fact, it should be starting to be distributed to school districts that utilize the NYSBA policy service. We use another BOCES policy service. However, we'll be having access to that. And again, the goal is to have a statewide policy that would drive conversations at board tables, that would drive goal setting at board tables, that will ultimately drive actions in districts across the state. And so as a backdrop, this is work that, quite frankly, almost it's kind of like you give birth and then you see the graduation of your child and you're like, phew, finally, this is coming to fruition. Because it's been a long time in the making, and I have to give kudos to the NYSBA Executive Director and his team for embracing this. And this is just a start, because we know across the state different communities, different boards of education have different perspective when it comes to matters of equity, when it comes to matters of diversity, when it comes to matters of inclusivity. And I separate those terms because oftentimes people lump them together as if it's the same soup, but they're very different things, and we have to define those things accordingly in order for us to appropriately address the various components of it. So again, pleased to have done that yesterday and looking forward to tomorrow. I believe that we have several board members who will be on that webinar tomorrow, so we're looking forward to that as well. Related to something that Grace alluded to, and thank you very much, Grace, and several other folks were on a call we had last week, and the board will be having a presentation at next board meeting with a representative from the Diversity Committee talking about some of the things that we're doing. And the reason why I'm focused on this particular topic, because when you think about where we are right now, not only as a society from a social justice perspective, but where we are from an economic perspective, where we are from a health and wellness perspective, this conversation cuts across all those dynamics. And it's important for us to frame it in a bigger picture other than our individual nuances or the limitations of our individual biases. So I think the big picture framing is important as we talk about this, because we spoke about it in our goals. We spoke about it when we put our budget together. You hear our auditors tonight talk about the fiscal health of the district, but also the balance in terms of how our resources are used to try to address the various needs of our students. Those are all equity conversations. And should I say, those are all equity actions beyond the conversation. So I just want to frame that a little bit for the board as well. So pretty excited about that. We're also, here we are now in your third week of school, and each day is pensive still, because, you know, quite frank with you, we still so much contingent upon, and I don't want to sound harsh, the behaviors of a few that can truly, the proverbial, all it takes is one bad apple to spoil a whole bushel. It's really that. And when we look back at the COVID cases that we dealt with over the last week or so, it's one or two epicenters, if you will, that spreads. And I think that sometimes people don't realize that. And so I'm harping on that again because I want our schools to stay open. I want our schools to continue to be safe and vibrant learning experiences for our students. And our community, we really have to step up to the plate, because we see it. We see people show up at events and they think because they're outside. But if you're outside in a mass group, it doesn't matter. If you're in a group of people outside, don't fall to that notion that, well, we're outside so we don't have to wear a mask. If you're mingling with each other, that's a problem. And I see it here on campus sometimes when people are just kind of walking through or doing those kind of things, or right now as we open sporting events, we're limiting spectators, and we know that people show up, think it's the normal admission, and they get there and they're here, but you can't come in regardless of how much we try to promote it. And then people just kind of linger, and they linger in crowds. And I'm saying to our community, those who are listening and those who we share with, we have to be responsible for each other. And my motivation is very simple. I simply want our schools to be open and create the best possible and safest educational experience for our students. And when we do that well, and we work very well with the Saratoga County Health Department. They are absolutely on board with us, and we are on board with them. And that partnership has been tremendously beneficial for us to try to track things and trace things. Back to your comment, Mr. Stevenson, about the cohort piece of it. And so we're trying to do our best. And so I'm pleading again to our public to be considerate of that very fact. Be considerate. If you can't be motivated by your own personal health and well-being, be motivated by the fact that we're trying to provide a great experience for our students. So I appreciate the opportunity to do so. If you do want me to continue the information items side. And so related to information items, Mrs. Chase is here, and as she comes forward, I'm going to just shift to because we have auditors who are virtual. So we have, and Mrs. Chase will introduce them. And just for instruction to auditors, whoever's going to speak, I'm going to pin you to the screen so you'll be the person at that time to speak. And so we go one at a time as we move forward. So Kathy?
Thank you. Our external auditors, again this year, Cusack and Company, and we have Jim Cusack with us, as well as Jason Mara, and they will talk about the clean opinion that we received this year for our audit.
Okay, this is Jim Cusack, and I wanted to just summarize by saying, or start by saying, we met last week with the audit committee and reviewed all the reports and the financial statements and the results of operations in detail. You'll have in front of you a 93-page document. It's the main financial statements, your federal programs, your extra classroom activities. It's quite a project to get through. This year in particular was quite challenging, but the district did a wonderful job allowing us safe access to the district's offices, safe access to the district records. The audit went very well, considering everything. Management responds immediately to our request. We give them a fairly lengthy audit request document. They make the records available. It's a fluid process because as we see things, we email or text, and we're very careful to, be physically distant. But we went over much of the findings with the audit committee last week. So what I thought I would do is turn it over to Jason Mara, who's going to briefly update you on our audit, the results of the audit, the financial results of the district, as well as the financial condition of the district. So Jason, if you'd like to take over now.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Jim. Good evening, everyone. Like Jim mentioned, we have a 93-page document here, over 100 pages in total. It's quite a large document and quite a large audit. Just to give you a brief overview of the audit process and the financial document itself, I'll touch on a few of the highlights, and if there are any questions, feel free to either jump in or mention them at the end. Either way is fine. The preliminary work and field work went well. We worked very well with Kathy, Becky, and their team. The back and forth is always very helpful, and any requests we have are answered very quickly. So as far as the audit process goes, it goes very well. Getting into the financial statements, the first section of the financials, pages 1 through 14, is a synopsis of how the district did for the year. It's the management discussion and analysis. So that's a great section of the audit. This is a very large document in total, so having this summary section is very conducive to the board or anyone reading this financial statement document. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that. And as you read through the MD&A section, there will be a few references to COVID and how COVID is potentially impacting the district. Fortunately, for our audit year, it really only impacted the last couple of months of the year. So financially, it didn't impact the June 30th, 2020 year for our purposes, but we did reference COVID because it is a current issue and it is an ongoing issue. We get to the pages 15 to 17 is our clean, unmodified opinion. Like Kathy mentioned a second ago, it's the highest level opinion that we can give any entity that we're auditing. So kudos to the district. Nothing changed in regards to that this year. So it was a clean bill of health and no qualifications on the audit report. Then we get into the actual financial statements of the district. And we start with the full accrual section, which is pages 18 and 19. And that section really includes all the long-term assets and liabilities of the district. So where page 18 would reference a negative net position or negative equity of approximately $240 million, that certainly isn't the case at the fund level, which is how the district operates. Just a quick summary, we're required by GASB to record the full accrual level as well as the modified accrual level. So the district on a daily, monthly basis operates at the fund level per their budget, a pay-as-you-go basis, modified accrual level. So pages 18 and 19 show the full picture with all of your long-term assets and liabilities, such as the post-employment benefits, that sort of skew the bottom line a little bit because they are more of a paper entry. I just kind of wanted to point out that differential between the first couple of statements and the rest of your document. The full level statements at the actual fund day-to-day management levels start on page 20. So as you'll notice, the net position for the general fund, as an example, was a positive 37 million, with profits of 4.4 million. Those are the highlights we can take away from this document when we're looking at the fund level, how the district truly operates really well, and the district really funds their reserves properly and funds the day-to-day operations of the districts in an appropriate manner. Some of the, on pages 20 through 22, we have some large adjustments that take place to get to the full accrual level, like I mentioned earlier. A couple of examples would be, we bring on your fixed assets, all your long-term fixed assets, which are approximately 88 million. And going the other way, we bring on the other post-employment benefit liability of approximately 327 million. Again, this is the paper number. These are actuarial determined amounts, and it drives the district's equity way down at the full accrual level, but it does not impact the general fund budget level, which are on a pay-as-you-go basis for that. So just to try to explain the statements a little bit. Moving on, we have your proprietary and fiduciary statements on pages 23 to 26. This accounts for your extra classroom activity funds and similar funds to that. Followed up with pages 27 through 64. Oh, I'm sorry, was there a question?
No, go ahead, Jason.
Okay, thank you. Following that brings you to your notes to the financial statements, all your footnotes, starting on page 27 through page 64. There were no new major accounting pronouncements that took place during June 30th, 2020. So I would mention those if something did happen, but there were no really major GASBs that took place, and there really weren't any new major financial statements disclosures that took place. So I'll just kind of keep on moving through the document, I guess. Starting on page 65, we have the required supplementary information that goes through page 75, roughly 10 pages worth. A couple of items to point out on pages 65 and 66 is a couple of important schedules to the district. It shows your budget versus actual. You are well within your spending budgeted line items. You know, as everyone is well aware, annually your budget is approved by the voters, and you have to abide by that budgeted document. On page 66 notes your expenses versus your budgeted expenses, and you are well under the total budget that was allowed for the current year. So, you know, I want to point that out. That's nice to hear as a district. On page 72, also, everyone is well aware that the district, Kathy and Becky, have to monitor their fund balance levels. You're required to keep your fund balance within 4% of the upcoming budget. So as you'll note on page 72, you were a touch under 4%. I think it was around 3.6 or 3.7. So the district does a great job in managing the reserves. The district has multiple reserves in place, and they fund them appropriately. As an example, during these uncertain times, with COVID going on right now, Kathy and Becky packed their charity reserve to account for the potential of of any upcoming assessments that might negatively impact the district. So things like this shows how well management and the board really truly manages the district on a day-to-day basis. After the required supplementary information, we have the federal audit section starting on page 76. So just to remind the board, in addition to the financial statement audit, we also audit at the federal fund level. Your total federal funds exceed $750,000. So we have to then select major programs to audit at the compliance level. For June 30th, 20, we audited the special education cluster. And I'm pleased to report that there were not any major findings that took place. And that's quite a large grant. That's a good percentage of your total federal funds, and everything appeared to be in order, and there were no major findings to report on that. To conclude the financial statements, the last couple of sections, we have our extra classroom activity fund that starts on page 83. That is a separate audited statement within this financial statement document, and we also render our opinion on that as well. Even though a lot of these accounts might have smaller balances, we look at that through the eyes of the extra classroom activity fund itself, not through the eyes of the district as a whole. So we are looking at smaller items within the extra classroom activity fund during our testing. And again, it was a clean opinion and no major findings to report. And to conclude the financial statements, the last 3 pages, 91 through 93, are our required communications to governance. And this is where we would disclose if there were any major hiccups that took place throughout the year, any major disagreements with management, anything like that. And there was certainly nothing to report on that level. Becky and Kathy and the staff are great to work with. We're in there 2 different times of the year for almost a week at a rip. And when we're there, we are the #1 priority. We get things very quickly, most often the same day we request them. And it really just is a great audit. So it went well. There's nothing major to report as far as major findings go. We reported to the committee last week, and we sit down with the committee at the start of the audit as well. I'd like to just mention to everyone that you have a very devoted audit committee. It's very easy to tell. They ask great questions. I've been on many boards and presented to many boards, and it really is nice to see when the board, as well as the committee that reports to the board, truly cares about the district, and that's certainly the case with Shen. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. If there are any tonight or going forward, you can certainly get a hold of us. So I'll turn this back to Board or Kathy, and we can go from there.
Any questions?
Do we have any?
Go ahead.
Somewhat ironic that we have a picture-perfect audit, and we're heading into probably, I would say, the most challenging financial period because a lot of unknowns, not because we're not tracking it internally well at all. We're tracking it internally very well. So does this all break if something bad happens, or are we going to find ourselves just happy and thankful that all this was well lined up through the document? How does that work?
Well, I think it's 2 different things you have to look at. We have to look at practice, and then we have to look at the fiscal realities that school district. In other words, you could be in the best fiscal situation and have lousy practices that will reflect lousy in your audit. Or you could be in an awful fiscal situation and still have great practices to take best advantage of the fiscal situation. So I think right now, the audit reflects, 1, that our practices are on par or above par, which will then, it positions us because we have, it's habits of mind, right? You have good practices, so when we find ourselves, or if we find ourselves in a much more stringent financial situation because of external factors such as state aid, or federal aid, or the lack thereof, we are better able to, if you will, use the word that we have been using recently, pivot, to make those adjustments because we have well-established good practices. And also, one of the tremendous benefit that our auditors serve is also serve as an honest broker with us. In other words, they'll let us know that, okay, this practice is not acceptable, unacceptable, mediocre, great, or not, so that when we're making decisions, and I think I want to point to one that Jason pointed out to, the funding of tax certiorari reserves. Kathy and I had the conversations when we started to come to the end of the year, and so we started thinking about all the various pinch points that would come down the road. So in other words, what are the things that we can try to control or mitigate in the future by the decisions that we make right now? And knowing that the economic cycle is such that you have businesses that will potentially and or going out of business that will have an adverse impact on us from a tax certiorari standpoint, we can't wait for 6 or 8 months when that happens to say, oh my God, what are we going to do now? Versus how do we position the district to be able to deal with those things? And that's one, quite quote, one less thing to deal with if there are other things to contend with. So I think that's the point that Jason was trying to make, just is one example. And there are many examples of that that we try to do to again, position the district in a place that if we have to pivot or make adjustments because of some of the potential harsh fiscal realities, we can do it easier. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but we can do it easier because we have good practices in place.
And it's much less likely that you're going to be surprised. I think these guys do a great job of not only explaining what they did in the audit, but also answering questions and walking us back to what the reserves and talking about how COVID, even though we see that it's not impacting 2019, 2020 in a big way just yet, but we know it's going to happen in this school year. And so they weren't blind to that. They definitely spoke to that. I have to say, it was really impressive to see your team, Kathy, and working with Jason and Jim, their team. It's clear that even though we're during a pandemic, it was get it done. You were focused on the goal, and that's clear. I didn't think. I think originally we were thinking we weren't sure about it being ready to present at this point. I know at one point we said something to that effect, but it happened, and it just speaks to the focus and dedication of this team. And I also wanted to say, I have to mention Becky Hole and Greg Mayo, and I know there are others, but at that table, Carol Lonfontana, who is also new to your group. It's like I said, I know there are others, but those are the ones that are there, and they also are at the ready to answer questions, and that's, I mean, we just have a really strong, team that is good at what they do, and they own. If a mistake is made, they own it, and they're a very humble but very hardworking group. And thank you, thank you, Jim and Jason. Thank you for the nice presentation. Did he freeze?
Everybody on Todd, Gary, Christina, do you have any thoughts?
No comments. I've spent many years on the audit committee, and the report that Jason gave is typical of what we come to expect from our school district, and so it's something, yes, to be very proud of.
And just thank you to Kathy and her team. That's already been reiterated, but it can't be said enough that we as a board can have the faith in our staff and as well as our auditors, who have been great to work with, knowing that that everyone's doing their due diligence, have the best practices, and it gives us faith as a board when we move forward on things, that things are being done the way they should be. So thank you.
Thank you. I have to say, kudos again to Becky Hull and Joanne Hammond. Their goal every year is to get it done better and faster. So I think that they've done that every year so far, and I'm sure we'll continue to.
So Jason and Jim, you guys could have a good night. Thank you very much for joining us.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to shift back to present mode. My apologies. speaking of audit, the claims audit report, I don't know, Kathy, if you had anything to.
Yeah, again, the claims auditor didn't find anything of significance, and reported basically a summary of all the information that he audited, and the audit committee reviewed it, and, we're pleased with the audit as well. I don't know if there's any questions on that report.
Oh, I just noticed, so is that on the new agenda, the internal audit report?
No, the claims audit report.
Just the
Claims
audit,
audit.
okay.
Mhm.
The internal, oh, that's right, we had that on the last month's report, but they didn't have an opportunity to present until this past one.
Correct.
That's right, okay, gotcha. Also, with the financials, the current, well, actually, I'll wait on this, but because the internal audit was specific to facility services, and we were talking about that, there would be nothing for this school year, potentially, because we can't rent out the facilities as we have in the past.
Right, it certainly will be curtailed.
Right, but there is a number that's being captured, that's like past billing?
Correct. So the
Okay.
audit that was done was for 18-19, the school year 2018-19.
Yep.
They audited a sample of 32 of 72 groups.
So, but Kathy, that audit is not the one we're talking about.
No, it's not, I'm sorry.
I just want to
Yeah.
make sure the public, we're talking
Yeah,
about.
yes, so,
But it is part of the audit committee minutes. So I just wanted to reference that because we hadn't spoken about that. It is included in the minutes. Very small write-off, if you will, based on the grand total of what it is we actually bill. We bill about $280,000 a year. I think the write-off amount was about $2,800, so pretty insignificant in the grand scheme of things. We also have practices in place so that if groups do not pay, they're not allowed to rent again until they pay prior debt.
and the other thing that I thought was important, and I'm pretty sure it's in the minutes too, and that is the new software. So the types of problems we're billing and certificate of insurance. And the new software, like my school building, what they use now. Now, the hope is that it will eliminate or mitigate or minimize those occurrences. So, and I've heard good things about it. So, so you're right. Rich wasn't actually present to talk about the claims audit report, but there were no significant findings. And so, yeah, sorry for shifting to the internal audit report.
Any other questions?
Any other thoughts from anybody?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as Dr. Wood comes forward, as it was mentioned in the audit, the independent audit report, that federal grant funds are also audited. And each year we try to have this presentation on the grants to the board. Just for context, we have the general fund budget, and then we have other funding into the district from grant resources, and most of those, in fact, all of those are federal grants. So Dr. Wood is just going to walk through briefly those, so the board has some sense of what we're talking about when we talk about those federal grants.
So annually, the district is in receipt of funds from the federal government, most of which pass through the state government. All of the grants that you see on this first page pass through the state government and are applied for as part of a consolidated grant application. At the federal level, on this first page, where Title I, Title II, both Title IIIs and Title IV are part of, at the federal level, ESEA, which is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And when that was adopted and New York State came up with its version, it became ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. And so the district is required to, we're offered funds, but we have to outline how we're going to spend them and then meet a number of other criteria. And so the funding, you can see for this year, we have our Title I funds, which have been kind of on the downward slide, unfortunately. Title I funds are used to improve student achievement and provide extended time to students. That's just a general overview of what you can do with Title I funds. In order to qualify as a Title I school, it's very hard to defend this practice. It's what schools are told to do. You take your district average for free and reduced lunch, and any schools that come in above that are the schools that you direct your Title I funds to, and the schools who are at that average or below, you do not. And so it is somewhat challenging in that we will have schools that qualify as Title I in Shenendehowa that would not receive Title I funds in any other local school district if their overall average was higher. So it's just important to maintain context. It's how the government makes sure that Shenendehowa receives money, but we make sure we're spending on things to such as academic intervention, support teachers, and a lot of the funds for Title I also go to summer programming with additional slots going to the students in our Title I schools.
Elizabeth, let me just interject one point to that. The great point that Elizabeth made, because if someone say that Shen Title I school has a free and reduced lunch of 21%, and say District X Title I school is 80%, one, that's a huge disparity. Yes, in one sense, that's correct. The big difference, though, is that the school district with a Title I school at 80%, the amount of money that they receive total is significantly more. So in this case, our total allocation of $353,000 in comparison to a district that may get $20,000 and distribute accordingly. So the proportionality is also important when you look at the total as well as the benchmark for eligibility as well. Does that make sense? So I think it's just using those two things kind of put into a tighter context.
Yeah, thank you. Title II is a professional learning grant, and the majority of the funding for Title II goes into our coaching. So we have 5 coaches, academic. Yes, we have 2 lead teachers for technology. We have an instructional coach at the secondary level, Vanessa Kramer's position. We have at the elementary level, Julie Burnetter's position, and we have Anna Sugarman as our professional development coordinator. And so this grant helps to support coaching, that kind of academic instructional coaching. Title III immigrant, it is always somewhat of a surprise to Sarah Chaffee and to me at the end of August whether or not we're going to be receiving Title III immigrant funds. The state reviews all the data that Mr. Milia's office uploads, and there must be some magic formula in there as to who they qualify as an immigrant, and it does not. I don't believe the definition matches exactly with somebody who was born in a different country. It's a more complex description than that. But some years we get the funding, some years we don't. This year we did not receive any funding for immigrants, and we may again next year. I think maybe 3 times in the years I've been doing these grants, we haven't gotten it, and other times we do.
What's the qualifiers? I mean, where
So the state reviews all the data that we upload to the state education department, and they know what they're looking for in terms of who they're going to award funds to. I believe we had a reduction in the number of students that would qualify as an immigrant, a true immigrant, last year. Next year, if last year we had 33,000, next year Sarah and I could open it up, and I always know it's like 2 weeks before it's due that we have to determine how it's going to be spent. We might have $38,000. And we say, okay, so this year, what are our priorities for supporting students who are learning English and outreach with those families? So it feels it too when you're administering it. Title III is a much more stable. The Title III English as Language Learners grant is much more stable. That one we receive pretty much yearly, and there are not significant changes to that. So even years where we do not get immigrant funding, we do receive the English Language Learner grant. This also is used to support summer programming. You'll hear in 2 weeks when we do a presentation on summer programs that we have a pretty robust English as a New Language summer program. Much of the funding comes from this. We also have the Title IV grant, which is where we've been targeting supporting social emotional learning, and also it talks about student support and academic enrichment, but our focus for the use of Title IV has been social emotional learning, getting materials that have been used by counselors and certain programs in the counseling office at the elementary and middle school, but also diversity, equity, inclusion. A year ago when we went to Ithaca, funds for Ithaca came from here. The conference Mrs. Hoffman referred to earlier at the start of the meeting the bridging, the
BOCES one.
the BOCES one, yes. That will also be funded this year out of the Title IV grant. So also we get grant funds for special education. You'll notice a significant dollar amount difference. Section 611 is our special education programming for the district. That is where a significant number of our special education teachers and instructional materials come from, curriculum work, et cetera, is coming out of that Section 611 grant. Section 619 is really it's the preschool, kindergarten through first grade. That is also some staffing supplies and materials. And that gives us $2.7 million in total allocations from federal grants.
Any comments from our virtual attendees? Christina, Todd, Gary?
None here.
None at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Wood.
I'm Mrs. Carmen tonight.
No, Mrs. Carmen.
I'm going to be Mrs. Carmen.
Okay, that's great. Looking good. All right. All right, so the policies and procedures are first reading. We don't have Mrs. Carmen tonight, so Dr. Robinson is standing in.
Yes, if there are questions, I'll try to address those questions. Went to the policy review for a first look, and we'll be coming back to the next business meeting for the board for approval. So if there are questions, I'll be more than happy to address them.
None here.
Okay, so we're moving into our consent items. First being the treasurer's report. Can I get a motion? Naomi is first, Bob is second. Virtual people, chime in when you want. Okay, any comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. B, minutes. So September 15th, I think, Christina, you were absent on that one.
I need to abstain from that, yes.
Okay, so can I get a motion on the 15th?
Motion.
Todd is first. Bob is second. Comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
One abstention.
One abstention is Christina. Motion passes. September 29th, meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Christina first. Bob second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. Action items. Number 1, acceptance of external audit report. Can I get a motion?
A motion.
Naomi first.
Motion.
Christina second. Any comments, questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Any nays? Motion passes. Number 2, acceptance of external audit corrective action plan. Can I get a motion?
A motion.
Yes.
That was Todd first. Naomi was second. Comments or questions? All in favor? Any nays? Motion passes. Was I on number 3?
Right.
Acceptance of internal audit report and corrective action plan, facilities
There it
use.
is. I'll motion.
All right, Naomi first. Can I get a second? Bob is second. Any comments or questions?
We already answered them.
Yeah. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. I'm going to combine 4 and 5. Contract special ed tuition, Rochester School for the Deaf, and contract captain, Community Human Services. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Christina first. Bob is second.
I just have one question, and so with these contracts, especially the one with for the school for the deaf, for that one, the student, I believe, is living there, correct?
Yes, correct.
And so the only thing I was surprised is that there's no COVID or any language to protect the district. I'm not sure how that works. But so I did read through it, and I'm just curious about, when we're writing these contracts, especially this school year, if our council can look at the contracts and,
We can, however, that school, the liability is theirs under their insurance. So what we can, we'll follow up to make sure, but it's, right now, it's not typical in these type of contracts to see that, because it's an expectation that, particularly for residential facilities, that they're following the New York State protocols, all those type things, because it's also part of their licensing and ability to function as well, so, but we'll just, as a due diligence, we'll circle back with that.
yeah,
And they do have their own separate policies
Yeah.
related to COVID.
Right,
Insurance-related policy, yeah.
And so what I was thinking of is more along the lines of, so it's for one student, and so I understand that, but if, if we were not able to go for whatever reason, maybe test positive or something, there's no language that protects the district for billing, for being, you know what I mean? That's really where I was coming from.
Gotcha, yeah.
Just addressing, what happens.
If the kids can't attend,
If
do
the
we
kids
still pay
can't
the
attend,
tuition?
exactly.
And we do, and we have the same quarantine that applies, and the school has to provide educational services to the student
Oh, I
while they're
see.
separate quarantine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially for a residential
But it
program.
doesn't actually say that in the agreement, though.
Right, this is the standard year after year agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was it. Otherwise, I'm fine with it.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Any nays? Motion passes. Number 6, bid recommendation of award number 2102 FAC loader rental for snow removal. Can I have a motion? Bob, can I get a second? I think I heard Todd.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay.
So the only question I have with this one is, and I'm sure we do this every year, because it's specific to December 1st through March 31st, what happens with the early storms and, if we need this
So,
service?
the rare occasion that we have that November storm, we have our own equipment as well. This is additional equipment.
Right.
So we use our equipment for those other purposes. So this is beyond, this is supplementary to what we use additionally. We have our own snow plowing equipment that we use otherwise as well.
Yeah, because it also, so what is weekly renewables when it talks about weekly? Because it gives the range and then says with weekly renewables. What does that mean?
So if we have to extend beyond that, whatever period that is, if I'm not mistaken, this one is one of those, so for instance, I think we've had situations, well, let's hope, I don't even want to have this conversation. I'm not you, I just don't even want to have a snow conversation in October.
Well, because we've had
Yeah.
storms in November, and I thought, oh, this is from December 1st to March 31st.
But we have over the years purchased, this is again, all supplementary to what we have, and if we have to unfortunately extend it beyond that period, there's that clause to say what does additional amount it costs to go beyond that period. So we hope that we never have to execute that portion of that clause.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
No problem, sorry.
All in favor?
Yes.
Any nays? Motion passes. Number 7, scholarship and local grant donations with gratitude. Can I get a motion? Naomi's first, Christina second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Any nays? Motion passes. Mrs. Mylod, acceptance of special ed placement.
Good evening. I have for you special education, CSE and CPSE recommendations for one.
Motion.
Can I get Todd is number 1. Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Christina. Do I have any comments or questions for Mrs. Mylod? Hearing none, can I get all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. Mrs. Bush with personnel?
Yes, good evening. We have one retirement on the agenda tonight. Sheila Ruby is retiring after 20 years of service. She is at Guana, currently as Mrs. Gorley's assistant and was my assistant. So she's the only retired in this.
I'm so sad.
Can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
Naomi's first. Can I get a second? Bob is second. Any comments or questions? Congratulations.
Congratulations.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Thank you, Mrs. Bush.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Secondary public comments. Is there any? I have none to report. Dr. Robinson?
Can I just make just a follow-up comment? I just want to let the board know that Mrs. Stevenson read the statement from a community resident, and was noted there have been conversations in the past, and one of the things that we would do again to ensure that we do exercise due diligence, I'll be discussing with Dr. Wood and Mrs. Smilard, because we need to make sure that, one, we fully understand his assessment of the situation, and two, he understand our capacity as well, and hopefully we could bridge that gap and not have a situation where a parent feel compelled to stand outside and walk on the sidewalk with a sign, because that's not what we're about as a school system. So we'll, I'm just saying that to the board, that we'll do some follow-up with the parent, and provide him with the appropriate opportunity to have that conversation. And if we come to a place of agreement, great. If we don't, at least we could all know that we have exercised the requisite due diligence to try to understand the situation better as we move forward. So we'll do that follow-up.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that.
For the good of the order, can I ask a question for that?
Yeah, I was going to have a
now?
comment, but go ahead.
Oh, no,
No,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
It's going to come out after. Go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted to, now that as far as school reopening, it's happening. We're still open, and the focus has been to do that. So some questions have come up. Actually, one came up at the end of the high school PTSA meeting, and it was specific to the social, emotional initiatives. So with this pandemic, it's going to go through this whole school year, and we're starting to hear more and more about how our students and staff are dealing with this, and it's definitely taking its toll. And so the question was, what has changed? What more is being done specific to mental wellness of our students? I suspect that wasn't a one-off feeling, and in that particular forum, it was looking for support from the high school PTSA. What could they do to bring in people to help our kids? And so I'm looking back at the district and thinking I need to share, because that question was asked of me, and I'm now presenting it to you.
So timely presentation. On the board meeting of the 20th, we have update on COVID-19 implications on instructional delivery that Dr. Wood is in the process now of putting together a presentation for the board. There'll be several components under that, and we spoke briefly today, and if I'm not incorrect, SEL is one of those components that she's now collecting information from the respective buildings to say what are some specific things people are doing or planning to do, so we could have that shared with the board. So I would say stay tuned, if you will, to the 20th, because at that point we'll have a much more comprehensive answer to share with the board and subsequently the public as well.
And one other question was asked of me. This was actually not part of that meeting. It was asked to be separate from that meeting. As far as help desk access over the weekend.
Help desk meaning technology?
Yes, with Chromebooks. And right now, I think there are some principals that do respond, but there are certain issues with these Chromebooks that they may not be able to help with.
Well, I mean, it's a staffing capacity piece.
Yes, I know.
And so, I mean, kudos to those who are working over the weekend that they need the help desk ticket. That's great, and we know that many people do. However, the reality of it is our IMS staff only work unless we need to have special projects that they come in on a weekend to do. And typically people put in a ticket, so to speak, and come Monday right away they try to address those. And right now we've expanded that. So when you think about capacity, not only do, say for instance, the high school, and Grace could correct me, we still have the shed, the student pieces, so student helping students. Same thing here in the middle school. we've also now extended out to try to provide supports to parents and students at home. So that's a whole different dimension, added dimension, to trying to support their technological use or access to parents as well as staff. And so we know that's one of those pinch points, if you will, that I'm not sure we can effectively address, because we don't want to create a situation where we're pulling limited staff away from the high peak times, which is Monday through Friday, to be the Maytag dishwasher guy who sits and waits for the call to come, and you may get 20 one day and none the next day kind of thing. So we're very mindful of that, and IMS folks are very mindful of monitoring those and try to prioritize those tickets right away. And even some instances, if there are issues that are a result of system issues that occur over the weekends, because quite frankly, when those things happen, myself or one of our administrators, we're texting and say, hey, what's going on? This is down, that is down. So those issues are when they're universally applied, are often addressed quicker, because many of those can happen remotely. But the onesie, twosie are a little bit more challenging, particularly on the weekends.
So actually, I agree. I'm not necessarily pushing for that. So the person, I did refer them eventually to their school principal, because I did look at the website. I couldn't find an email address, and I also said it's outside the business hours. But maybe having something so that they can email their request to, understanding it's outside the business hours, and they'll get an answer during business hours. But they have it logged and submitted.
That's the safest, always the safest route. We tell families and students, reach out to your child's teacher and or your child's principal, because those parties will effectively farm it out, so to speak. Right. Versus if you do otherwise, it becomes a hit and miss, so to speak. Depends on who. So we start there, and administrators particularly are very conscientious about seeing those things, farm them out to IMS or whoever the follow-up needs to be on those situations. So that's probably the safest route that I would ask people to do, because that's the most, let me say, that's the most consistent way, because those relationships are already established. If someone is sending something to someone who they have no idea who the person is, they have no idea if the person received it, versus if they already have a relationship with the building principal, you at least know that, okay, I can call the office the next day to say, hey, by the way, I sent an email, did whatever get it, versus I sent an email and went out to someone who I don't know where that person's office is. So that's probably the most consistent and safest way to address those things.
Thank you.
Anybody have any other comments that they want to make at this point?
No.
Okay. I just have a few more things I wanted to share. As we know, the Shenendehowa Education Foundation is continuing behind the scenes, supporting the district as time goes on here, and recently they have opted to make a donation to the district for our nurses, and Becky Carmen is leading the charge, I think, with another nurse, and as we get into the fall time and the students are outside, prolonged use of time outside, the nurses that are out there with them, we have, the foundation is purchasing fleece overcoats for our nurses, so I wanted to let everybody know that. Continuing education opportunities, Dr. Robinson and I have been talking about this, and he will be working with district leadership, namely Dr. Wood, in helping us find some opportunities for us as a board to continue on with. And one other thing that I'd like to talk about is, I'm sure Mrs. Rajat may comment on this as well. If anybody had noticed that we got a few emails today regarding students that basically they don't want students wearing masks. It's overkill for the students to wear masks. We don't understand why the students are coming to school.
Not come to school.
Not come to school. Sorry about that. So I just want to comment back on this, and we're not taking sides, but I'm just commenting on the fact that we did receive those emails, and obviously we've set up a structure and process here at Shenendehowa that caters to both students and parents that felt that they didn't want to send their students to school, so they are in CVL. parents that felt comfortable enough to send, and we've done a great job in keeping them safe here, they are sending them. Regarding mask wearing, this is a rule, it's a law. That's what we're doing through New York State. This isn't a Shenendehowa law, however, we are following it, and it does make the most sense. Nationwide, we see what happens when you don't wear a mask. So, that's my commentary and my personal belief. So we have to be careful, and obviously, it's for the student safety that we're looking out for. So that is that. Any comments from the other board members on those emails?
No.
Okay. So having here no more comments, at this point, I will call for we got policy review coming up next, and so for right now, can I get a motion to adjourn? Bob is first, Naomi is second. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sure there's no nays. Here we go.
Wait, I changed my mind.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.